As I'm approaching CVPR 24 in Seattle, I want to have a few episodes, maybe one or two, about sort of in general how I feel about artificial intelligence today. It's June 2024. So, and what I mean with that is I want to connect it with something that I picked up in the book that I'm just reading in Ascension by Martin McGuinness. And the there's a passage in the book where the narrator, the I person, the main character in the book, talks about an optimal life form, and that life is a pretty it's a pretty transient concept actually. Actually, I would say in Ascension is in essence a book about life and intelligence, and that already brings the first question, which is, well, are life and intelligence the same thing? Is that what we mean when we talk about life? Or what exactly is life and what is intelligence? And can it be separate? And I'm not attempting to answer the question now, but I want to generally just to bring up some thoughts about the optimal organization form of intelligence and how that pertains to the way artificial intelligence is being propagated right now in science and in technology. And I think it's interesting to think about it because there's a lot of different approaches. I would say it's almost like a Cambrian age of particularly computer vision, which is the conference I'm going to, CVPR. If you look at the workshops there, there's a workshop about 3D. There's a workshop about autonomous driving. There's a workshop about foundation models. There are workshops about depth estimation from monocular cameras, and there's many more workshops actually. AR, VR, robotics applications, and then there's the application workshops, which are things like using computer vision for earth science, using computer vision for STEM science, things like that. So there's a lot of different approaches, and there's no path that you could say, okay, this is the path. Like even if you're like we humans, we have this urge to declare winners all the time, and it's an oxymoron to declare a winner, because the winner of today could easily be the loser of tomorrow. And this is very Darwinian. Like you could be very fit for a certain biotope, and then the biotope changes. The next thing you know, you're not fit anymore, or your fitness takes you into a different type of mental state where you might become complacent, and then you lose fitness. So it's a very transient state actually, what it means to have the optimal life form, or what life even means. And sometimes life can be extinct because it's not able to adapt, i.e. dinosaurs. So there's a lot of consideration like that. And I want to use this episode as sort of, this is part 2 of CVPR. This is a general thought episode. So I'm not going to talk about specific papers or workshops or presentations. I just want to share my general thoughts inspired by the book that I'm just reading, which is, by the way, it's not even intentional. I mean, yes, of course I pick a science fiction book because I think I dabble in science fiction sometimes. It's not my main genre by any means, because I have my issues with the scientism that sort of seeps through science fiction novels. In other words, the scientist, the genius, the almighty personality that gives humanity a gift that or makes a deal that humanity can't refuse, kind of thing. I'm not so sure, but that's for a different episode, because just as a tangent, I think that science is more like, science is the necessary ingredient for technological innovation, but it's the entrepreneur, it's the scalability of something. It's actually the adaptation of an organization for, in other words, the right business, the right startup, or to use Peter Thiel, the minimum amount of people to execute against an idea that really determines success and progress. It's not the science. The scientist is the tinkerer, the intellectual tinkerer that spits out ideas, and then it's the entrepreneur, the actual tinkerer that executes. But back to the main topic. So, what's the optimal life form? Let me first talk a little bit about the book and how I got inspired. So, in the book, the main character of the book is a microbiologist, and she studies microbiology in the deep ocean. She's a marine biologist, not a microbiologist. I apologize. So she studies life in deep ocean water, generally whatever oceans bring with them. She studies it, and studying ocean life, of course, always gets you to the question of the beginning of life, because presumably that's where it started, right? We believe that life must have started in ocean forms, or actually in transient locations where maybe oceans were bordering into something else. The hypothesis in the book is that it must have been some sort of vent structure, so heat and minerals and things like that coming from the inner crust of the earth, exploding into an ocean and creating a mix of oxygen and other elements that then propagated this concept of prokaryotes and the eukaryotes. So the single cell organisms, prokaryotes, and then the eukaryotes, the nuclei. And that's already, I would say that's not even contested. This is now scientific fact that we have excuse me, my FSD just did a little bit of a funny thing. It's sometimes funny why it does that. Anyway, got back to the episode. We have the prokaryotes, which are single cell organisms, and then for some reason they decide to cooperate and let other prokaryotes become their nucleus, and then start sharing tasks. Mitochondria develops, things like that. And I think the book also mentions this life form. So there's this more optimal way to coexist, and maybe that was inspired by a change in the biotope, or maybe that was a coincidence, and then the biotope changed because the eukaryotes were able to process more, maybe more CO2, and then oxygenated the whole planet. Maybe, I don't know. I'm not familiar with the science, but I know that I've read some books about the actual scientific conjecture of how life evolved, and those are sort of ideas. But in this book, in Ascension, it's a novel, so it's really a story about two things. Again, this is a time, so I'm gonna review the book formally when I'm done with it. But I think the story of In Ascension is, first, it's a story about life and the science of life and the idea of what is life and how does life relate to intelligence. And then the other part of the book is also it's a human aspect of exploration. I think it's simply that, like, what does it mean to be a human and explore space? Like things like the psychology of being remote from Earth, the psychology of being confined in a space. The author does a really good job on that front. But as far as life is concerned, so let's get back to the first sort of big theme of the book. So the story of life, what is life? How does life evolve? How does life differentiate itself? What is intelligence? What is life? All these questions come up. And with that also the optimal form of organization of life, right? This is a question that by asking the question, I think it's an important question to ask. I mean, we're so anthropocentric as humans. We don't really, I believe we don't appreciate sometimes that the life form that we have, it just evolved like everything else. And it could have gone the other way. We could have had different types of body shapes, different types of energy processing technologies, lungs and oxygen and the blood carrying the oxygen to the limbs and all of those kinds of things. They are here because they evolved that way. At least that's what we think. And it could have gone the other way. And the question then is, okay, is this the most optimal form to live? And the answer is, well, it's optimal for the biotope that we live in. I mean, we've proven that as humanity, we came from the savanna of East Africa to conquer the world, literally, and create technologies that can destroy the world and also enhance the world into multi-planetary, or enhance humanity into multi-planetary species. So clearly, there's some optimality in the way we exist as humans. And the question then, in my opinion, is what is the optimal life form going forward? And what is the optimal intelligence going forward? And how should we develop intelligence, since we are now actively developing what we call artificial intelligence, which probably sooner or later will just be called intelligence, but let's just leave it at that now. Let's call it artificial intelligence. So what exactly is the optimal way to develop it? And then, of course, also there's the alignment question. What is the optimal form of intelligence? But I dare to answer the second question already. I think we don't know. I think we don't know what the optimal form of intelligence is. So let's focus on the question of how to develop intelligence. This is not even a podcast. It's June 12, 2024. This is Cryptelco. For the data fund is up 3.9%. The market is up 1%. For the year, we are down 6.2%. The market is up 13.5%. We're underperforming by 19.7%. So let's talk about the topic of the book. Again, the topic of the book is generally, there's two topics, but the one that I want to focus on here is what is life, what is intelligence, and what is the optimal form of developing intelligence. What does it actually mean to have the optimal form of intelligence? And maybe life could be defined as the optimal form of intelligence within the context of the biotope that the life is embodied in. So there are a couple of things here. One is intelligence, and one is body, and then there's the organization of that intelligence with the body and as it relates to the biotope, to the environment, right? And the book is really, really good at depicting several aspects. One is the marine biologists' research into the depths of the ocean and understanding how potentially life could have evolved there. Then there is scenes in the book where the explorers go in a capsule very, very far away into part of the solar system that are really, really far away. And then the question there comes along that maybe life, a human life, in that type of situation when you're months and months away from Earth, actually a year away almost, so a year of travel, and you're really far away. You are light minutes or maybe even light hours away from Earth, so transmission is possible but very, very cumbersome because of the latency. And then there's all the stuff with food and oxygen. And so what's the optimal life form? And I think the author is kind of alluding towards a combination that maybe in a situation like that, it makes sense for humans to try to merge together into one organism. Now, they can't do that physically, at least, obviously not without technological help, but they can do it mentally and also metabolically. In other words, they eat the same thing, they start thinking the same way. I mean, it's very similar with your partner. I've been married to my wife for over 20 years, and I feel like we are in symbiosis. Like, obviously, our bodies are still separate, even during the act of making love, they're still separate. But there's some overlaps. The kind of the idea of we can finish each other's sentences. We anticipate what the other person likes in terms of food, like things like that are signs of symbiosis. So maybe this is the optimal form of life on Earth, is that two people form a bond, right? That's the nucleus, the family, and then they create offsprings, and then they go on and create the bond again with two people. Other experiments have been tried. Socialism, there's been attempts, certainly still are, but there's been attempts to even like Huxleyan sort of mass, communes, things like that. What I'm trying to say is that there's been experiments with people trying not to focus on the nucleus of the family and doing other things. So there's been, I think life constantly is trying to evolve and find its optimal form, and that's just an interesting perspective, right? Now, let's talk a little bit about CVPR and why I'm mentioning this here, because I think it's worth thinking about. Okay, since we're now creating intelligence, right? Since we have the technology, since we found a way to create what we call artificial intelligence, the question of, okay, what is the optimal form of developing the type of intelligence? What I mean with that is some of the classical questions are, for example, should we have more and more compute? Should we have models that are more general or more specific, and then somehow connect the specific ones? Should we have maybe robots teaching robots how to do things, embodied and not embodied robots? In other words, we could have a system maybe where, like a large language model teaches a robot how to pick up a bottle iteratively. So literally tells the robot, you're wrong, you got to move your arm a little bit more to the left, your trainer is wrong, things like that. That's the question of, okay, how do we actually teach AI to become better at what it's supposed to do? And there's different forms of, this really is very similar to the evolution of life, right? That's exactly how life evolves. It figures out a way to cooperate, learn together. Bees learn from each other in a different way than humans, and zebras learn from each other. Zebras learn some stuff by themselves, some from others, some is in the DNA. What is it good to have a lot of knowledge predetermined in the DNA? Certainly efficient, so you don't have to relearn things, but then you can't adapt, right? Because you're not flexible enough. Having very little pre-trained knowledge gives you a lot more adaptation, but it takes longer to learn. The human has found maybe a sort of a middle way. The human offspring starts, I would say, really become independent, maybe with 16 years old, something like that. Whatever the age is, it's much longer than most other mammals, I believe. Certainly longer than almost any other species. At least to my knowledge, there could be species where the offsprings even take longer to evolve into maturity. But that's because the human, sort of the codex of the human, has converged towards, okay, I'm going to give you some pre-printed knowledge, or pre-trained knowledge. Like, there is certainly stuff that's already there. The ability to learn how to walk and talk probably is innate. In other words, it's in the DNA, it's in the code, it's been transmitted over millennia. But then you still need years and years to actually learn how to do math, and learn how to be nice to people, and learn how to treat the other, sex, or all that kind of stuff. You just have to learn. That's what we call maturity. And there is certainly a point to be made that maybe other forms of life, or even humans, might change with the environment, and humans can change the environment, so therefore they could also evolve differently. I mean, one example would be we're changing the environment now with AI, and that could potentially allow younger kids, to already do very meaningful work. They might have other talents, maybe they just don't have knowledge and experience, and maybe they haven't done enough exercises in this particular field to be good at it, but they're maybe very talented in doing parts of the problem, and then they can use AI to augment themselves. So productivity goes up. People could do much more meaningful work at younger age and also older age. So things change, and what the optimal life form is could change also. We have, let's say, the job market changes, so maybe having a nucleus with two people in a family could be suboptimal. Maybe it's better to be alone, raise your child alone. All these kinds of, anyway, the question of the optimal life form is really an interesting question. There's no clear answer to it. I think it's just worth asking the question. I want to finish the episode now with some concrete thoughts about CVPR, since I'm going there next week. It's a Wednesday today, and I'm going to be there on Monday. There's really a Cambrian age of methodologies of how to do AI, how to even just approach the problem, right? Should we use reinforcement learning? Should we use federated learning, distilled models versus full-blown models? There's been a general tendency, I'm paraphrasing one of the OpenAI presentations that I attended at Stanford this year, and the person said that what really worked well in the last, years, couple of years, 5, 6, 7 years, 10 years, depends how far back you want to go. You want to go back to ImageNet or even before. Anyway, what works really well is large general model and lots of compute. So that seems to be working for a general kind of AI that is able to reach human level intelligence in certain domains. Not everywhere, but certainly, ChatGPT, FSD, things like that have been huge breakthroughs and have shown us that there's a lot more, that there's a lot more than just 140 characters or a fancy Google search. Like this AI thing is real, it's here to stay, and it's going to proliferate into humanity and change humanity. And the question, again, that I have for scientists and that I'm focused on is kind of a little bit on the methodology of things. So just simply asking myself, all right, what are the optimal ways to even teach AI? Or what are there more intelligent ways for learning how to learn? This is really sort of the summary of this episode. And I apologize. Sometimes I do these episodes and I'm actually learning on the go what I'm trying to say. And this is one of those. I think what I'm really trying to say is I'm going to go to Seattle next week and I'm going to think really hard about what is the best way to learn how to learn. And the inspiration again came from actually a presentation I attended by Qualcomm that they spoke about their CVPR endeavor, and they spoke about one interesting thing, which is a model that can teach somebody how to be a better, how to do better in the gym. And that made me think, look, if I have a model that is trained on squats and weightlifting and those sort of things, that's actually an interesting approach. So if a model can teach a human how to do better squats, then it could potentially also teach a robot how to do better squats, how to grab a knife, how to grab a bottle, how to empty a bowl, wash a bowl, whatever a humanoid robot is doing. And we could have an AI which is trained to train robots. That's the idea that I would like to think about.